So hello everybody and welcome to this session of the Chocolate Life Live. Today we're going to be talking with some of the investigators who worked long and hard on the recent global cocoa market study and Dominican Republic case studies. These studies were funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They were overseen by the International Executive Service Corps, and there's lots of really interesting data inside them. There's lots of really interesting observations that can be made, things that we might look at going forward in the future. And I wanted to have the opportunity to speak directly with some of the people involved in producing the report to give us their insight and understanding of what's going on. So I'm going to play the intro and we'll be back on the other side. And we're back. And I want to welcome all of the viewers who are participating in today's live stream, either on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn. And I'd also like to say hello to my guests. And would you please introduce yourself, starting with the lower right-hand corner. Marika, could you please give us a little background on who you are, where you come from, and your participation in this research?
Yeah, my name is Marika, and I am co-founder of Gaia Cacao. And Gaia Cacao is a company based in the Netherlands. We are specialized in cacao. So where it says, we were coordinating this project, and my role was to facilitate certain things, but also to come up with information like we all did actually on specific topics, such as trends and other stuff.
Okay. And Mariana, how about you? Welcome to the show today.
Hi, Clay. Good. Thanks for the invite, and thank you for, we were discussing it with you before this, the thorough understanding you did on the report was pretty nice, and it's appreciated by the team. So yeah, my name is Mariana de la Rosa, and I'm with Marika, co-founder of Gaia Cacao. For this project, I took on the leadership role, so I was a project leader for the whole research of both studies. Yeah, so looking forward to hear the questions and whoever's out there in the audience who have read it to be able to provide some answers. Hopefully.
And so, Yaron, welcome. Now you're not with Gaia Cacao, so could you please connect your background not just to the cocoa and chocolate industry, but also to what it is that your role was in this report?
Yeah, hi Clay, hi everybody. My name is Jeroen, or Jerome in English, and I was invited by Marika and Mariana to be on the team. Gustavo and Kachi from Peru were also on the team, but unfortunately they are not here. Maybe they'll join later. So it was fun working. I primarily contributed to the global cacao study, and I myself have been a social entrepreneur in the cacao and coffee business for the last 15, 16 years, with developing chocolate brands and marketing them in primarily the European Union. I've also been doing a lot of consulting with producer organizations and exporters in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And
just for transparency, the nexus for all of us actually is Amsterdam. So the Chocoa conference over the course of the last 10 years is where I got to know all of you, and we have gotten a chance to know all each other. I do want to remind people, if you're watching, either on Facebook, LinkedIn, or on YouTube, that if you go into the comments or live chat, you can add a question, add a comment, let us know that you're watching, always greatly appreciated. But if there's anything about what it is that we've talked about, please let us know. A quick way of introduction, if you go to TheChocolateLife.com right now, what you can do is you can go to this page right here. You can see this, read this post, and we're going to be talking about 2 studies, the Global Cocoa Market Studies and the Dominican Republic Case Studies. You can download them here. I am going to be showing some slides from the presentation I did 2 weeks ago, and you can download them here so you can follow along before or after. And this video actually links to the live stream we did 2 weeks ago as an introduction to today's story. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to one of the slides that I presented. And what I want to do is I want to set this first part of the discussion. So if I am a small chocolate maker, I don't have access to very, very large scale, in-depth research, which is at a reasonable price. And so for me, because I'm not, I don't have the research budget of one of the Big 10 chocolate makers, getting access to research and then being able to get people behind the research to say, yeah, this is the way we're going to talk about things. And we can point to this study and say, okay, this is the basis under which, right, we can all agree, this is the definitions. And so one of the ways I think that we can use the study, so that we in the industry can use the study, is to take a look at the market segmentation, which is done in the Global Cocoa Market Study, right? And so what you say is that there are 3 primary tiers of cocoa market, and within one of the tiers, there are 3 sub-tiers. So we think of bulk cocoa, and you have this name for it, commodity, bulk, and mainstream, and then one level up, and you have commodity, bulk, mainstream, certified. Can you, in other areas, you say, okay, here is the price and all these other things. Can you get us a better understanding of what the report means when it uses these 2 terms? So is there a price associated with these things? What is that price? What is it based on? And do we have any idea about, what percentage of the marketplace is represented by any of those things? So anybody who'd like to begin, just jump in, please.
Well, since I did the price chapter here, I may say a thing or two about it. So what you call CBM here would be the cacao that would be sold at an FOB price that would be related to the world market price. You'd be looking at the New York or the London futures market, and you'd be looking at when are you going to deliver that cacao, and then you'd be looking at what the particular price is for that month to deliver it. And it might then for the CBM Plus add on an organic premium of around $300 per ton, but the CBM solely, that would be a world market price. Now, having said that, they do look at contracts such as the FCC contract that is used in London. There's CMAAA contracts that are used in the United States.
Can I jump in here really quickly? So
yeah.
FCC is the Federation of Cocoa Commerce. It is based in the UK, I believe, now. And the CMA is the Cocoa Merchants Association.
Correct.
Just to get that in.
Yep.
You used a couple of other terms. You used FOB. And so for those people who may not be aware, what does FOB actually mean? And could you compare it to what is the difference between FOB and farm gate and what's called CIF?
Sure. So FOB would be free on board. So that's the price typically used for for cocoa being sold. CIF would include the insurance and the freight. So as an exporter, if you sell CIF, you would be charging a higher price because you're also insuring it and you're also paying for the freight. When you're selling FOB, the buyer has a responsibility of paying for the freight and also the insurance. Farm gate is something that a farmer gets. So we pay quite a lot of attention in our study to the difference between FOB and the farm gate price, because obviously many of us are in this business and are looking with a perspective of improving farmers' lives. So it's very important to see what they get paid. Obviously, there's other factors involved. There are standards of living beyond payment, but the price certainly is an indicator. So those are some of the differentials there. So what I was going to say about the price related to CBM would be not only this world market price established in the London and the New York futures market, which is basically a price determined by the supply and demand worldwide, but they would also look at country differentials. So if your country has a great reputation of always providing a good quality cacao and always on time, buyers are willing to pay a positive differential, so a little bit on top of that FOB price. And so a country like Ghana would be an example of that, where typically they have an above average quality that they could sell to the market. Other countries that conversely have a very negative image because they've been producing bad quality, not consistent, they would be punished by a negative differential. And so those differentials, we also looked a lot into study, like where are those published? How can you find them? It's really not published very much. ICCO has basically, which is the International Cacao Organization, they publish monthly reports in which basically they reflect what the market, the market is willing to pay. And that depends on, sometimes country differentials can go really high if really people need that cacao. It happened just last year and in 2020 when people really needed cacao from certain areas when there was scarcity and price differentials went up. Then, for example, they can drop as well when there's surplus, when there's too much cacao. So it's all very volatile. But those are basically the two main factors that determine the price for commodity: world market price at London and New York, plus or minus a differential based on the reputation that country has. When you talk about CBM certified, you'd get premiums for organic, most notably, or fair trade, or you'd be looking at rainforest. Although in our research, we found that rainforest, now merged with UTZ, didn't really show very much premium. There may be some premium, and it's all very voluntary. There is a higher price paid for that. And the next segments, I'm sure you're going to talk about that later, Clay.
Right. So before we jump in to the premium segment, what I'd like to know is from you, Jerome, do we know how much of the market is represented by these two segments? So, for example, I have heard that the commodity segment of the market represents at least 80%, and that the certified part of that market represents another 10 to 15%. So this is 90 to 95% of what last year was 5.5 million metric tons. Do you think that observation still holds?
Yeah, that could hold. I would like to say the following, though. The big companies, the biggest buyers, Barry Callebaut, Cargill, Olam, are actually also implementing their own programs. And it's up for debate whether you want to call that CBM certified, like the CBM Plus, or whether it still falls into this regular bulk mainstream category. There, I think, could be more documentation. They have their annual reports on what they do. Just to give you some examples, they try to make the cacao traceable to where it comes from, to what farms. They try to look at child labor, and they monitor that, and they have remediation systems for that. So they look at their CO2 emissions in all of their supply chain, because they also process the cacao. So they are looking at a bunch of these sustainability factors more and more, and they may tag on rainforest. A big company may say, hey, I like to have my product in supermarkets branded with the rainforest logo, so I'll do that. So then rapidly you would be falling into this little bit higher category, the CBM Plus category. And then you would see that percentage of CBM Plus would be increasing quite rapidly.
Mm-hmm. Great. I want to take a quick break before we jump to Mariana and Marika. And I want to say hello. We have somebody who's checking in from Dallas, Texas, and also somebody who's checking in from Uganda today. So Handy Chocolate from Uganda, thanks for joining us today. So Marika, Mariana, Gaia Cacao is a specialty cocoa broker and trader. So can the two of you talk about how your company sees, I mean, you obviously, because your company deals in cocoa at this sector, your understanding and your use of this research becomes important for how you talk to your customers and how you talk to other people. So when, how do you see premium certified? What is premium as opposed, what defines premium as opposed to bulk, right? Start from there. And then are the higher categories just price-based, or are there other things that are going on there that differentiate them from other cocos? So,
yeah, if I may jump, I think the premium segment really is determined by those very special particular attributes that a cocoa can offer. So it could either be, of course, the flavor characteristics. It could be the terroir. It could be the story behind it. So for instance, we have a cacao from Sierra Leone who has a wonderful story behind it that we would love that it falls into this premium segment. And it also linked to a good marketing campaign or marketing story that we can place it there. Which is not the same for premium certified. Premium certified is that like same as a CBM certified, you would need the certification of an organic or some sort of logo that can place you into this category. So this is how we see the premium segment. It needs to have a higher quality, a better flavor, better sensory profile, a better story. It has to be, also has to have a demand by the premium or the craft chocolate makers, etc. So, low defect count is another parameter we look into this segment.
So there are technical components and organoleptic components.
Absolutely.
And in general, if I can just generalize, to move from one part of one level to another, what you're really talking about is the amount of data about the cocoa that buyers can and eventual consumers can have. So, if I know more about who the farmer is, I know more about where the farm is, I know more about the genetics of the farm, I know more about the post-harvest processing, I know more about organoleptic potential and things like that. I mean, it is these subjective things, but important things, which move the cocoa up from premium certified into specialty into ultra premium. Is that a fair way of just wrapping my head around how I might move within the segment? Marika, is that how you see it?
Yeah, in a way, yes. In another way, no. I mean, the segmentations are not rigid. They're not. Well, different organizations use different definitions of the different segmentations that we have. So the purpose of this study was not per se to come up with the right definition of something, but to categorize different groups and to connect them to certain qualities and to connect them to certain sizes and prices and everything. So like what Jeroen was also saying, and you also, is that there's a lot of information out there, but it's so contradicting, right? The numbers are contradicting. How much is there of bulk cocoa? How much specialty cocoa is there? How much premium is there? So we found that it's very difficult to find numbers of specific sizes of specific segmentations. But definitely quality is one of them. And quality it partly comes from the data that we know about the farmer group, the region, everything. But it also is something you can see in the cocoa itself when you open it, when you do quality analysis. So for example, when you talk about ultra premium cocoa, then we shouldn't expect any moldy beans in there, for example, or so definitely it's a combination of different criteria, and it's not fixed. It's also what people will want to give for it.
Well, ultimately, I mean, for those who've been following my writing and who've followed the discussions we had in Clubhouse around this notion of quality, I think of quality as a basket of attributes, right? And every buyer has a different set of attributes in their basket, and they value these attributes differently. And ultimately, what the determination of quality is what I'm willing to pay for it, right? If I'm not willing to pay for it, it doesn't fit within my definition of quality. I think there's some value in being able to provide at least some agreed upon definitions, even though I might play around, with where these are. Premium, these aren't I mean, these aren't black and white categories, it's continuum, right? From here to here, and I can fit many, many places along this continuum, right? But for example, I think that if I remember correctly, the study says that this ultra premium market, right, amounts to 10,000 metric tons. I mean, did I remember that properly?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you did.
All right. So if we also go and say that, you know, a small chocolate maker or craft chocolate maker processes less than 200 metric tons of beans a year, right? And we still don't have a good handle on how many of them there are. You know, I personally think there are well over 2,000 of them now. You know, based on my personal database that I maintain, as well as just everything that I see coming in on a regular basis and of new names in Instagram and Twitter and places like that. It seems like, you know, there's a new company in my feed every day.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, if I am a cocoa producer, so whether I am a farmer or an estate holder, which would fit into the study's definition of a producer, right? Or I'm a farmer-based organization, which could be an association or cooperative, right? So if I fit into one of these two groups, and I'm looking to offer up my cocoa, knowing and you want to charge $15 a kilo for your cocoa, knowing that the entire world market is only 10,000 tons, should fit into the strategy that you have for marketing your cocoa. And I know that part of what you're doing is looking at channels and access to channels and things like that. So how do you think somebody who is growing cocoa and then wants to sell cocoa can use the information about this to help them figure out how to approach the market with what it is that they're selling? I mean, is that a fair question for me to ask as a way to use the study?
Well, this is how to use this study. So if you are a producer and you're willing to locate your cocoa into a specific segment, I think you need first to understand your end client. So if you're willing to knock the door of a specialty chocolate maker, then you need to understand that you need all those, let's say, attributes that will, you know, reward your work, your beans. Mm-hmm. So it depends on which client you want to target and the volume you produce. For example, if your annual volume it's 1,000 metric tons, then it makes no sense that you fall into such a niche when you know it's such a small market. So it depends on the volume you manage. It depends you produce. It depends on the end consumer, on the end client you want to reach. So if you want to work on specialty, then you need to have your centralized fermentation. You need to have a clear, consistent, or as consistent as possible quality to be able to deliver on and on same quality to your specialty premium chocolate maker, right? Mm-hmm. So I think you really need to, you need to use this to understand where you want to go as a producer.
Okay. If I can, we have a question from Thomas, who's in the audience, who asks, is that what Oko Caribe and Zorzal have been doing in the Dominican Republic? I mean, because I know that one aspect of the study, you know, specifically focused on the Dominican Republic.
Absolutely. I think Oko and Zorzal have really pulled out, you know, every single attribute that placed them into this specialty segment. They have a wonderful, for Zorzal, for instance, has a wonderful sustainability or environmental story. Mm-hmm. It has a good, consistent flavor with their centralized facility. It's Dominican Republic is recognizing the ICCO with the fine flavor status. So you have so many elements that could place Oko and Zorzal into this premium segment, and then of course they can demand for the price if your end consumer client is willing to pay. Marika, Jeroen, I don't know if you want to add to this.
Yeah, one thing I want to add is that a lot of people tend to think that the ultra premium market is very large, right? And there's a lot of opportunities, and there are opportunities because prices are higher. One of the things that we really wanted to dive deeper in is like, how big is this community, and how many of these producers are there, and what prices are they selling the beans for, and also to put this information together so that when you are a producer and you read this and you think, okay, like what Mariana said, I want to put everything I've got into this ultra premium market, you might find that it is very difficult, maybe even impossible if you have a larger volume to do so, because the market is just way too small. And that's what we found a little bit conflicting with the information that we read sometimes from ICCO, for example. So we wanted to show that, of course there are opportunities, and it is an interesting segment, and it is growing, but yeah, it is small. So if you are let's say a cooperative in Sierra Leone or in Ivory Coast, and you want to access this segment, then it is fair to say, okay, we're going to still continue with, producing premium, to get a premium on top of our prices. So to have commodity prices plus a premium, and to have this small portion of that really high end and get that towards the ultra premium market.
Okay, so I have a technical question, and I don't know if any of the three of you how deeply enmeshed you are in some of the research questions, but a colleague of mine from LinkedIn, I think this is Dawn, who actually is involved in formal market research and really does understand many of the technical aspects of this, asked the question: are the variables in this quality discussion discrete enough so that you could actually use a formal methodology, which is called discrete choice conjoint analysis, where you give people options and you say, which of these are the most important to you. I don't know if any of you know about this technique enough to be able to say, would it be interesting to go and subject this market segmentation into something so you can get some really, really good, fine-tuned understanding of what people are really, really looking at. I mean, Jeroen, it sounds like this is something that you want to jump in and talk about.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that analysis, but what we've been writing about in this study are some methods that have been used, are being used currently, that are just in practice being used by the sector. And then for to categorize your quality, for example, you would in first instance use these parameters that are already mentioned within the FCC and the CMAA contracts. There you can read about what it means if you have slightly over fermented or under fermented, or what kind of defects are going to be presented in your cacao samples. Based upon that, certain pluses and minuses in payment also will result. But there you can very clearly, that's a very interesting tables that they've designed, and these have been published also in our study, where you can actually very concretely evaluate and indicate what kind of quality you have. With regard to specialty, we've described methodologies that are used, for example, by Seawine, that uses many different attributes that are being evaluated by a sensory panel. So we describe these kinds of processes as well. These obviously are subjective kind of methods to determine if a cacao sample would have woody, floral, fruity, smoky kind of tastes, etc. But if properly trained is the idea, you are able to get a pretty accurate idea of what attributes can be pretty objectively attached to particular cocoa. So these are the types of analyses that are being used. As you know, Martin Christie has another set of evaluations that is being applied not so much to cacao liquor, but more to chocolate, finished chocolate. So there are these practices in cacao, much like in coffee, you have the cupping protocol that can be applied and that are being applied to determine how the quality should be written down.
And Clay, if I may add, I think it's important to the audience that's listening now. I mean, the aim of these studies was not to create new information or for us to come up with certain specific conclusions or opinions. It was just basically we're given 6 months to perform it. And what we did is we went through literature, through interviews. So we have gathered that data in this report. So I think the method that Thomas has mentioned, it is not, like Jeroen says, not common in the industry. So you won't see this commonality appearing in this global report.
Yeah, just from my own personal experience, I go look, for example, at the data which is available in the FAO stat database. Mm-hmm. And then I go and look at the data which is available in the publicly available stuff that ICCO publishes, or that somebody has scraped from the ICCO website and has made available somewhere on the internet. I mean, for example, on a research project I did, I was actually looking for a copy of the FCC contract. And unless I'm a member of the FCC, I can't get a copy of the contract in order to look at it. But I was able to find somebody who had published it on the internet. And so I was able to say, here are, in fact, the terms of the FCC contract, which are, just mind-boggling in and of themselves. We have, yes, I mean, I think that, from a research perspective, in addition to all the tables, which synthesize data from a bunch of different sources and try to take things which appear to be contradictory. You look at two things and you go, these two things can't be the same. Which one of these, if either of them is right, or is the answer somewhere else? And so, I see this as one of the real valuable parts of this study is I can go, okay, somebody has done a deep dive and close look at all of these resources and said, here's a good handle on what you should think about using this and how you think you should go use it. And that's valuable. And then, the extensive bibliography. I mean, I thought, I've got, over 1,000 research papers downloaded on my computer, and I'm looking at some of the listings in the bibliography, and I'm going, I need to find that primary resource so that I can actually get my hands on it, so that I can see what it is that it says and improve my understanding of what's going on. So, I think of these as, some of the most important ways to think about it. But because we do live in a world where people like to put labels on things, and we do need to organize things as well. For me, understanding that, commodity bulk represents, 80% of the market, right? And this commodity bulk mainstream certified represents maybe another 10 to 15% of the market. When we talk about premium, we talk about what that means, because in my opinion, what people do is they tend to make the definition based, Forastero is bulk and Trinitario and Criollo. And what we look at the percentage of, how much of this, we start arguing about how much of this is Trinitario and how much is this Criollo, and that's where the definition lies. And I don't think as an approach, that is one that is justifiable, right? And so looking at this as, okay, right, we have a way of approaching how we're going to think about this. And, for me, who is also interested in issues related to, supply chain traceability, the cocoa value chain typology for me is also just really, really important, because when I start thinking about how do I trace things from the farm through to the factory, through to the consumer's table, right? Who are the actors? And having a good understanding of how I want to place those actors. And I can go, this is just not something that I made up. Here's this study and they did all this work and this is what they came up with. So, Mariana, Marika, I don't know which one of you is more, familiar with this particular typology, but, for people who may not be familiar, can you give us an explanation of what it is that you mean by each of these terms?
And I think this is your...
Wow, I think what we mean by each of these terms is basically the actors that have a role in the cocoa value chain. So we took the approach to go all the way from the farmers, so the independent producers, organized producers, and we actually made a definition a producer of cocoa is, I believe in the report, was those who produce more than 70% of their farm. It is income coming from cocoa, I believe. Then we have the farmer-based organizations, which is the next in the chain. we have intermediaries, brokers, etc. We have exporters, traders. So all those actors that play a role in the cocoa value chain. We include even also have in the value chain retailers, which are also in the report, and I don't see them in this list, but they also play an important part, and they also take, let's say, they have their participation or their in this typology we did. And by typology, because it's funny this time we were trying to understand how to typologize certain elements, how to typologize each actor. So for instance, one typology we discovered or we realized in the Dominican Republic study is that the farmer-based organizations could be a cooperative, which is a formally or legally based organization, register, and so, etc., so and so and so. Then you have association. That's another typology, but it's still in our definition of the report. We still call that an FBO, which is a farmer-based organization. So that's the whole point of putting a title to each of the actors that we found across our interviews, research, et cetera, et cetera.
So I'm noticing that I haven't updated this. There were some errors that I saw, and I didn't update all of them. So we would think of as an organized producer as like an estate holder farmer. So within the fair trade nomenclature, it's what they call a hired labor organization. So would that be an organized producer, or is an organized producer something else? It wasn't clear to me in the report exactly what you mean by that.
An organized producer can be one that is a part of a cooperative or an association. That's what typically the definition is of an organized producer, because there's still the majority of producers are not associated, are not members of any kind of organization. They therefore are also don't have much leverage in vis-a-vis their buyers. So typically, NGOs, governments, and even among farmers themselves, there's these movements to get farmers together. But yeah, what we see, and that merits a whole other study. In fact, I did some studies of that way back in Wageningen University. Is why do farmers not associate themselves, right? And so that has various factors, but we can establish that, in fact, most of the farmers worldwide are not yet associated. They're just individual farmers that any buyer can go to and buy from.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have the idea of an estate holder, right? So where does an estate holder fit into? It's not a farmer-based organization, and it's not a smallholder farmer. Is the estate holder, right, an organized producer that's not a farmer-based organization? Is that, it's just thinking about this.
I think we'll still call it producer, but large producer. And in fact, I think in our report, we put small, medium, large. So it will still be our producer, but we can typologize it on size volume. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, again, for me, when we think about direct trade, one of the things I think about is what we're trying to do is we're trying to collapse the number of different ones of these entities that are involved from the farm to the factory. I mean, that might be one of the tenets of direct trade. So, in Ecuador, it is common for an independent producer to sell to a coyote, who sells to another middleman, who sells to another middleman, who sells to somebody who gets the product ready to go to export, right? And the idea of direct trade is, no, what I want to do is I want to get from the farmer's gate, directly to the port of export. And so I probably have a logistics intermediary and maybe nobody else involved, right? So again, for me, one of the reasons to think about this is when we think about direct trade, when we think about traceability, if I were to think about creating a digital traceability system, what I would need to do is I would need to recognize that the cocoa might or might not pass through every single one of these, and there might be multiple ones of these in each part of this, so that whatever system I create, has got to be really, really flexible, and and say that there's no one way cocoa gets to market, right? And even within one country or one region with a country, there might be a whole host of ways that the cocoa gets to market. And so understanding who these actors are, where they fit in the chain, what services they provide is, I think, foundational to try to create a digital traceability system. So how can we use this understanding? How can we use this typology to move forward in the creation of tools and storytelling and all the things that we need to do in order to be able to grow the industry? So, this is where it is that I'm coming from here. I want to take a quick reset. We're at 40 minutes past the hour. How we got there so quickly. I'd like to remind everybody that we're here at the Chocolate Life Live. Today's episode is sponsored by The Chocolate Life, specifically the new articles that we've been writing in support of this Chocolate Life live series. And I want to thank everybody who has become a member. I want to thank people who are here in the live stream, who are participating, adding comments, and to suggest, the best way to show your support of the Chocolate Life is to go and become a member, whether it's a free member or a paid member. Your support of the Chocolate Life helps makes these live stream possible. And before we go to the next part of this, what I want to do is I want to get a couple of questions and comments. The first one I want to bring up is Nate Engel. I think all of us in here know who Nate is, as one of the co-founders of Marika, now Beyond Good, although Nate is no longer with the company. And he points out that, Mariana, as you said, the retailer is missing from my list, but the retail margins can contribute up to 40% of the cost of the final product that the consumer pays for in some value chains. And I think for people who are interested, if they go to the Dominican Republic case study, there's this whole series of how the chocolate gets from the farm to the market, what the channel is. And then there's this distribution of costs, right? How much things. So, which I think is really well broken down and is a treasure trove of information, because if I'm involved either in selling cocoa or making chocolate, what I can do is I can look and say, oh, I'm spending too much in this, or I'm not, or my cost structure is out of balance. Does anybody here have anything else they want to add to what it is that Nate said? I mean, for example, we have this, 20-year-old diagram that's of a chocolate bar, and little bits of the chocolate bar are chunked out and said only 6% gets to the farmer. We've discussed that wasn't a part of this research, but is there anything that you've learned that can help us understand, where the money goes and who benefits or doesn't benefit?
Yeah, I can say something about that. We wanted to make an update of that same chocolate bar, and if we would have had more time, definitely would have done it. In the global study, we also have a breakdown of the different parts of where the money is being spent on, but we took it from a researcher. I don't remember which one that was, maybe CPI or somebody else who wrote that, but it is actually very interesting. And like what Nate also said, 40% is the margin that goes to a retailer. That is for all kinds of chocolate products that way, and then for the manufacturer as well. So these two together, that's already like 75% of the cost going to these two important parts of the value chain. And then for the cocoa itself, it was interesting, like you say, 6%, 7% of the value of the bar is spent on the cocoa beans. And well, we also spoke to a lot of chocolate makers. So we did interviews and we spoke to a lot of chocolate makers to also understand how that works for their value chain and the chocolate bars that they make. And actually something that came out is that indeed the price of cocoa is not the thing that determines the price of the chocolate bar that much. It is just a very small part of something that actually is it's not determining the price. So that was quite interesting, I believe. Dandelion also mentioned that to us, that it's not so much about the cocoa, it's much more about packaging and transport and all these other things.
I want to put an exclamation point on that particular topic. One of the things that I've done, and I'm in the midst of writing a post on the Chocolate Life, I will include my work, is I've created a series of worksheets and put them together in a workbook that would enable a chocolate maker or confectioner to model cost. So you can, one way you could use it is like, if I want to produce, 2,100 gram bars of chocolate an hour, how big a tempering machine do I need and how much cooling capacity? So you want to be able to have tools to model this so you can understand what to do rather than just sort of back of the envelope calculations. And I created a modeling tool this is like 4 years ago, and I presented at Chocoa.
Chocoa, yeah.
Yeah, I presented.
Scaling
I think
up
I did it twice.
program, yeah.
This workbook, in which it turns out that because, especially in the case of the craft chocolate maker, you can double the price of cocoa and have almost no effect on the finished price of the chocolate bar, right? Because of the way you think about labor, right? So that if you want to be able to have a higher percentage of the actual retail price of the bar go to the farmer, then it turns out that you as the manufacturer, right, have the most control based upon, am I hand sorting every single bean? So it takes me 10 hours to get through a bag of cocoa. Well, that's $200 I've just added to the product cost, right? If I'm paying a burden minimum wage, right? So it's counterintuitive. There is this sense in which we think that, okay, if we pay more for the cocoa, it's going to radically increase the price of a chocolate bar. In industrial chocolate, that might be the case, because the manufacturing margins are about as small as they can be, right? But when it comes to craft chocolate, just automatically paying $7 a kilo as opposed to $3 a kilo doesn't do anything to move the needle on this. What is the percentage of the finished cost of the bar that goes to the cocoa farmer? So, perhaps a philosophical, why is that useful in the first place if it's not a good indicator of anything? Or is it a good indicator of anything, but that's reliable? I don't know the answer to that question.
I think it's important to because you sense a little bit from the last comment that, boy, 40%. But those are indeed percentages that you need in retail in the northern part of the world, anyways, to sell anything. In high street, you have huge rental costs. You have personnel that is expensive. You have marketing costs. Now you have, especially if you get also more into the luxurious chocolate, you have your packaging costs, which get proportionally high when you order very little packaging materials, and you have all these things. So indeed, you would think, well, if there are so many costs involved in downstream, why would the upstream cost, basically the cost for the cacao, have to be small? Why can't it be a little bit larger, right? And then indeed, as you correctly mentioned, Clay, when you get into this industrial chocolate, if you get into the big brands who need to compete with each other, how Calabout's products will be competing against the Mondelez products, competing with the Mars products, etc. There you really are looking at cents. So any cent more for your cacao bean will be also, has this kind of multiplication effect in terms of margins that go downstream. But indeed, you are much more free in a craft chocolate kind of situation. But then, you do count on a willing audience, public that is able to spend a lot more. And as we all know, that public is very, very small still.
Yeah. No, yes, it is a conundrum. I mean, because I think that sometimes, when we think about what is the percentage of the price of cocoa that goes into a finished product, if what it is, again, is that a good benchmark to be determining what it is that we're doing, right? And I would say it can be used to muddy the waters, right? And so you can use it with good intentions, or you can use it to greenwash. And so, I will just leave it at that point.
Let's not go there.
But having consistent ways to talk about things that are clear, that can't be easily muddied, I think is really important. I want to get to a question. This is from Keith, who is a Chocolate Life contributor, who's connecting from YouTube today, and he asked the questions. So Mariana, Marika, this is for you. With such a limited quantity of ultra premium beans that get produced, are there additional premiums that are paid for first access to particular beans, protecting their access in years with low yield or high demand? So this is a sales strategy, right? Perhaps question, if you can.
I think a good example for this one could be, I'm just understanding the first access could be unique terroir, like porcelana or the chuao. Is that what he means? First access.
No, one of the things that you might do technically in auction terms, this would be called a first look contract. So I have a firsthand experience with this. So when I was with Sean Eskenazi in his first bean buying trip down to Chiapas, we went to a small cooperative in the town called El Triunfo, which is upstream from Escuintla. And in El Triunfo, we worked with this cooperative, and Sean saw what they're doing, and he went to the head of the cooperative and said, listen, I'm willing to give you $500 right now, right? If what you will do is, I see the plants that you've got in your nursery right now. So I'm going to give you $500 right now if, when this stuff starts producing, right, I get the right of first refusal, right? You're going to show it to me first. I can buy some of it, I can buy none of it, or I can buy all of it, but I want to be the first person, right, to have a chance to purchase this. And the members of the co-op there asked this interesting question. Well, what happens if you don't buy any of it? Do we have to give you your money back? And Sean said, nope, right? You don't have to give your money back, right? This is just an option that I'm buying to be the first person to look at it. So when Keith says first access, I think that's what he's talking about. So
can you show your question again? Okay.
So the question is, so given that there is such a limited quantity of these ultra premium beans, right? This might address the concept of poaching. I'm a small chocolate maker. I've gone to a buyer or I've gone to a producer and said, I want to have a contract with you and I want it to be exclusive with me. Then some coyote comes along and says, I'll pay you twice as much right now, right? So you don't have to wait 6 months to things like that. So, but, is there an additional pricing mechanism, right? Which is common in the industry, so that a chocolate maker could look at a producer and say, I want you to guarantee me, right, the right of first refusal to buy some, all, or none of your harvest. I think that's the question. Keith, if that's not the question, please let me know in a comment if that's the question or not. But that's the way I would.
I think the answer to that question will be yes. There are premiums paid to ultra premium specialty rare cacao. Mm-hmm. I mean, if your buyer's willing to pay it, of course. You wouldn't sell a first-hand specialty rare cacao at a market price, would you?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was in Venezuela on that same trip back in 2006, and we had a group of farmers that said, nah, I just want you to pay me cash when you pick up the beans. Like, no special financing, no special nothing. Maybe it's cultural, maybe it's not. So I have this specific understanding with this cocoa in Mexico. Do any of you, I mean, is this something that Gaia Cacao does, right? Or is it something that you have considered, working with specific producers and saying, we want the first look, right? Is it something that you've done with any of your producers?
No. Okay. Also, we don't really work on like an exclusive agreement with the producers that we work with. Also, because we think that they should have the chance that if they want to work with others, they can, right? Everybody's free to do so. Also, in the interviews that we spoke to chocolate makers, this wasn't something very common, but I'm sure there are some trading companies that have these kind of arrangement with producing organizations where they say, okay, it's not here yet, but once it is, it's going to be ours and we already pay you for it. But we don't do that. And we haven't heard much, at least I haven't heard much from the interviews where anybody was saying that.
Gotcha. So we're coming into the last 5 minutes or so of the scheduled time that we have today. And what I want to do to flesh out the rest of the hour is, are there aspects of the research, individually, right? So each one of you, I want you to think about this for yourself. You only had 6 months, only a certain amount of time, it was more, so the global cocoa study was more bench research, right? Rather than going out there and doing, a lot of primary research. There's a lot of primary research in the Dominican Republic, personal interviews, right? And that kind of stuff. But are there aspects of this research that you said, yeah, I wish I would have had another dollar and another day right, to be able to go and, just answer this particular question. So for you, what, it's like, I am over the moon that this research is available, right? I love the fact that the report's available. I love the fact that the study model, how to go about doing, how we went about doing what we did, right, is published. It's available from the International Executive Service Corps. I'll go find it and put it on today's post, so that if what you wanted to do is you wanted to do the Dominican Republic case study in Colombia or Ecuador or Peru, right, you'd be able to do it, and you'd have a data set which would be apples to apples comparable, right? My ask, the thing that I would love to see, and it's not in the terms of reference, nobody thought about it from a budgetary perspective, and I think it's a huge oversight, is that when the KIT, which is the
Royal Critical Institute.
I was trying to think of the English language version, but it's the Dutch Natural History Museum, essentially, did their study demystifying the cocoa sector in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, or in West Africa. They actually published the actual underlying data, so that if I wanted to go and download a table, I could download a table and do my own analysis of it. And for me, I love the charts that are in the report, but some of the charts are so small that I trying to figure out what the actual value is, right? I can't get at it. And I would really like to get at it, because I have data from other places that I like to compare it with, and I can't, right? So for me personally, kudos, love the studies. I personally want to, and this is why I'm doing this, right? I personally want to encourage, whether you're a member of the Fine Chocolate Industry Association or not, whether you follow the work of the fine cocoa and chocolate industry or not, I don't care, right? What I really want you to do is I really want you to take a look at these and say, can we come to a broad consensus about how we're going to characterize the industry, so that when we talk to each other, we're talking about the same things, right? Because this talking past each other, it's the gaps in understanding that open things up to greenwashing and misunderstanding, right? And so, personally, this is why I am so excited about these two studies and want to get people to know more about them, and why I'm doing these, and I hope others, in a series on this topic. And, again, my frustration is I want the actual data, right? So that what I can do is I can drop it into a data mining program or put it into a spreadsheet, and I can go, oh, now I can visualize these things, right, in a format, in a way that you guys didn't, right? But I understand there's no budget for it. And I think that is a fundamental oversight in whoever designed the study, right, that they didn't do this, right?
But Clay, the data is there, and it is available, because we also took the data from public sources, most of it actually. So FAUSTAT, ICCO, so all these reports can be downloaded. It is a headache to do so. I mean, there's so many.
You did the synthesis. Why should I have to do the synthesis you already did?
You read it then, the synthesis.
Right, but then I need to go figure out if I can copy the data, and do I have the data? Again, all I have is the chart. I don't have the numbers that generated the chart, right? And sometimes the chart is a synthesis of 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 different sources. And so true. I need to go find exactly the sources that you found, right? And make sure I cut and paste exactly. This is the frustration, right? But going forward, for anybody who wants to do a version of the Dominican Republic case study in another country, when you organize your funding request, please organize your funding request to include data hosting at some place. You can do it for free at GitHub. I mean, it can be done, right? But that you think about the publication requirement. So I want to close this out with that question. You had another day, another dollar, metaphorically speaking. Where would you have liked to have been able to spend more time, personally, and what interests you in the study? So, Jerome, we started with you. Why don't we start with you, and then we'll go to Marika, and then let Mariana close out the session.
So we did this comparison of the major chocolate manufacturers and cacao buyers on sustainability issues. And we found that some companies were quite forthcoming with this information, had wonderful annual reports on their sustainability issues, such as OLAM. They were also very available for interviews, and we could really get to the bottom of things and understand what they were trying to do, and they're really making progress. And I do have to give kudos to that one big company, but others are very inaccessible. So I would have liked to have more time and more budget to get to them, or do more research and in other ways to find out what they are doing on reforestation or to avoid deforestation, rather, what they are doing on child labor monitoring and remediation. What are they doing on CO2 emissions and a host of other sustainability KPIs that we put in that table. So that is one thing that I would have liked to have continued on.
Gotcha. And Marika, for you?
For me, it would be, well, something that came up often during conversations and in the reports is that, there's so much growth in the health and wellness sector. So there's a lot more focus of consumers on healthy products, and cocoa is perceived as something that's healthy. So dark chocolate, for example, is really growing. We see this in China a lot, but also in Europe and in the US. I would have liked to have more time to dive more deeper, particularly in the organic part. So how much really is organic? We have an indication of the size of the market, which is really, really, really very small, I believe 0.5%. But it is growing. Everything shows that it's growing, but to dive deeper into, what is the size? How does it work? Like everything around the organic part, I think that would be my, my focus.
Gotcha. And Mariana, what about you?
I actually have two that I would like to, that just came to my mind. Also discussing during our team meetings. One is, like Jeroen said, we had this amazing overview of what major companies are doing in sustainability, but we also wanted to go into what the smaller companies are doing in sustainability. Remember, Jeroen, and this chapter, I mean, we ran out of time. It was too much. It was something we weren't asked to do, but we wanted to do it. So we last minute took it out. But for a future study, I think putting the spotlight to the small companies and comparing them and what it's publicly available will be pretty cool to the global. And now to the Dominican Republic research we did, it's to go so the productivity chapter is one we pull out it was pretty cool. It wasn't, again, a requirement for our contractor, but we would have loved to do more correlations, productivity versus so many other variables that we wanted to explore, but we again ran out of time and just couldn't do it. So those two things, because productivity, it links to farmers' income. It's important. So understanding what drives productivity using this research would have been for us amazing, but again, we have a few, but not all that we wanted to do.
Yeah, and it would also be interesting to see, could we use better data which correlates all these variables? So you have education and farm size and a bunch of other cuts through the productivity variable, as I recall. I mean, would it actually be possible to use these in a way to be able to justify, going to the big companies? Less so the big companies, because when we get right down to it, it's the exchanges which determine the market price. I mean, it is the traders on the exchanges that are determining what the market price is, right? And they're hedging and using all kinds of complex strategies to be able to get a consistent price. I mean, again, I think if there's one fact that I think people need to go and look at the cocoa market study, is that adjusted for the price of inflation, cocoa is the same price as it is today as it was in 1981, right? And I defy anybody to go find anything else in this day that is the same price today as it was 30 years ago. And, it's like, how do we use that datum, right, in order to be able to, drive change? Is it possible to be able to use better understanding of what productivity is, because it is a complex, multivariate scheme, right? To be able to come up with something that says, this is really what the price, at the very minimum, the price should be. So, are there ways to go about using this data to be actually to provide some research-based, scientific-based, mathematics-based, right? Rather than just, this is what the price of cocoa.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Clay, there's actually quite a lot of efforts spent on that whole topic of what is in the price dynamics section. There is a big discussion on what determines price. Also, we have a whole section about living income, which also looks at it again. So in two different places in the global report, basically we came to the conclusion after considering all of the literature that it's not the exchanges, it's not the traders, certainly not, that determine, it's not the speculators either. In fact, speculators, mind you, this was one interesting observation, help the market. They provide the liquidity through which the fluctuation in the market gets less. They mitigate fluctuation. Now, unbelievable. We had never thought that. But what influences this price is basically supply and demand. That is the biggest factor, and all the rest is secondary. So that has been quite. I can't get into all of the details of it, but that has been quite well described. I think we did a good job on that, involving many different studies.
Okay. And not only price and demand, but also the factors that are affecting the demand, like COVID and political situations, and all these different factors that play such an important role. Climate change.
Okay. Well, it sounds like at some point, if anybody is interested in coming back, actually just doing another room, just focusing on what are the market dynamics, what are the pricing dynamics of the market, what's pushing it, and what that means. Especially if I'm a small chocolate maker, how do I take advantage, for example, of speculators who provide the liquidity to reduce, right, the variability in pricing. This is something that if I'm a multi-billion-dollar company, I probably have a trading desk that does nothing but that all day long, right? So, are there things that we can do, and what does it mean, and how do I go about reporting what it is that I'm paying, right? And not just I'm paying this amount of money, but how do I compare that against, the average price of cocoa at the world market price, the average price of cocoa in this country, figuring out what the living income differential might be for this place, just so that there's some context placed around it. It's not just I'm paying $8 a kilo, but this is, right, what is represented. I mean, I look at for example, the 2018 Uncommon Transparency Report, Uncommon Cacao, and I think they stopped doing this. At least I haven't seen it in subsequent reports. Is they actually said, here's the farm gate price that we paid. Here's the price we paid at the port of export. Here's the price we paid at the port of import. And here's the price range that we sold the cocoa for, and here's the quantity involved. Right. And so what you can actually do is you can look at the world market price at a particular time, and you can say, you can get a really good idea of what the economics of, right, a broker trader of the size of Uncommon are, right? And a good understanding of, are they paying more than the market price? Are they paying above the living? Just at some level, I'm just a data geek, and I like having this data so that I can dive into it. And for that, I want to thank the three of you. Right.
No, let's take the whole team. They're not here, but it doesn't mean that they're not.
I was going to get there. The three of you who are here with me today, and everybody who is involved, thank you very much. The three of you here today, and everybody who is involved in putting this together. I think it's a fabulous study. Any small chocolate maker, especially any small chocolate maker who does not have access to expensive custom research, should go take a look at this and see what is in this study that can be used. And again, I'm going to try to do all that I can to promote the language that is used in market segmentation and the work that I'm done, because I can point to the study and say, I'm using it because of this, and I want to encourage other people to do the same. Very, very quickly, I want to say thank you to Samuel, who joined us from Texas today. He has an NGO, and what I will do is I will go find out more about this NGO, and I'll put it in the post for today's talk, so that people can contact the NGO if they're interested in promoting youth in cocoa farming, which is a challenge, getting the next generation of cocoa farmers to do that. And also want to say thanks to Mohammed, who joined. Thank you, friend, for joining us. I appreciate that. And glad to hear that you are, in fact, a chocolate maker, and hope that you found today's conversation happy. So please subscribe, join us. We'll be here this coming Tuesday. We're starting Tuesday sessions. Beginning next Tuesday. Tuesdays will be about people. Friday will be about topics. So next Tuesday, we'll be talking about a gentleman whose name is Kurt Peterson, and also John Malik, who's a Chocolate Life contributor, around innovation, and not necessarily innovation in flavors, but innovation in a new kind of way at the level of small chocolate. And I got all sorts of interesting things planned coming up for the month of February and beyond. And with that, again, thank you very much to everyone here. I appreciate everything you got today. And that's for today. That's it for today. Thank you all. We'll see you back here next Friday and also this coming Tuesday as well. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you, Clay. Bye.